Welcome to Corwin's Teacher to Teacher podcast with host Carol Pelletier Radford. Carol is an experienced classroom teacher, university educator, founder of mentoringinaction.com, and author of 4 best-selling professional books for teachers. She believes the best form of professional learning happens when teachers engage in authentic conversations and share their wisdom. In every episode, Carol and her guests share stories about pivotal moments in their careers, successful classroom strategies, and personal actions they take to minimize stress and stay healthy. The Teacher to Teacher podcast is a place to engage in authentic conversation and reflection with experienced educators. We hope these conversations will energize you, keep you inspired, and remind you why you chose to become a teacher.
Hello, welcome to the Teacher to Teacher podcast, sharing our wisdom with our host, Carol Radford. I am Tori Bachman, a Corwin editor and co-organizer of this podcast, which we've created for teachers at all levels who are searching for practical wisdom they can use in their classrooms. We believe we're all constantly learning, and we're learning together. To share their wisdom today, we have 2 teacher guests with broad experience and interesting backgrounds. We have Maggie McHugh and Erin Jacobson, and I'll introduce them to you now. Maggie Lee McHugh is a mathematics education professor at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Her book, Bringing Project-Based Learning to Life in the Mathematics Classroom, published with Corwin Press, highlights her dedicated advocacy for classrooms to become vibrant learning places where mathematics can be experienced authentically. That sounds beautiful. Hi, Maggie. So great to have you here today.
Hi, thank you, Tori.
And Erin Jacobson is a dedicated advocate for beginning teachers, leveraging her experience as the coordinator of the North Dakota Teacher Support System for the past 7 years. With a background spanning roles as an elementary classroom teacher and instructional coach, Erin is committed to fostering supportive structures that empower educators to thrive. Erin is also one of the educators who's featured in Carol's recent book titled When I Started Teaching, I Wish I Had Known, Weekly Wisdom for Beginning Teachers. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Tori. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. We're so happy that you both could make the time to be with us today. We've been looking forward to this conversation, and we really appreciate the time to learn with you and to learn from you. I will now turn this over to Carol.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tori. I always get excited when we are matchmaking these 2 teachers who don't know each other and bringing them together from different parts of the country. So it's so exciting. What I really love about the Teacher to Teacher podcast, this is season 2, and what happened in season 1 is the magic in these conversations when we bring teachers together that don't know each other but have that same commitment to supporting our students and supporting beginning teachers. So I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's just dive in. So Erin, I'm going to start with you and Maggie next. Tell me what you're doing, what that means that you're supporting beginning teachers for 7 years in the huge state of North Dakota. And how did you get there? Like, were you a classroom teacher? What made you decide to do this?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So yes, I am the coordinator of what we call the North Dakota Teacher Support System. And North Dakota is a very large state, but it's not very well populated. And so we, as a state, can offer a first year and a second year mentoring program for all teachers in our state. How did I get here? Well, I originally, I was a social worker, but I went back to school and I became a teacher. I taught my first teaching gig. I taught 2nd grade in the morning and I taught 5th grade in the afternoon. I taught 2nd grade with my 2nd grade teacher, and she wasn't happy about it. She didn't want anybody to know about that. And I really, I felt like at that point, I knew that I really had a passion for figuring out how to support beginning teachers, because even though I came in a little bit of a different way, I needed support and I wasn't quite finding it.
So you were a career changer. Were you unhappy as a social worker, or was the passion for teaching never occurred to you? Like, how did that intersection happen? Were you helping?
Both my parents were social workers. So one worked in human services and one was a therapist.
Okay.
It just seemed like the natural way. However, when I was working in social work, I found that really who I wanted to work with was students, children. And so um, as I worked in a few different ways as a social worker, I realized what my heart was in was teaching.
Yes. You were listening to yourself and then you got the job. And I'm going to kind of segue into my next question because I'm curious now about a pivotal moment. So you had a pivotal moment when you changed careers. And I don't know what your parents said about that, but you change careers and then you end up teaching second grade, fifth grade. You're with this mentor who doesn't want to maybe, or maybe isn't prepared to be a mentor, had no training, and you're learning from that person. So what happened then? What another pivotal moment sounds like?
Right. Yes, I felt like I got good grades in college, that I wanted to be there. I had this passion, but I felt a little lost. And the other part of it is the school that I was teaching at was very small. So just one classroom per grade. And to collaborate or figure out what others were doing was difficult. And so I all along thought this isn't quite right. People that come into this field have worked really hard and they don't seem to be getting support in that first year or second year. Or who do you go to? So I started going to the speech language person in our building and asking her. She was the one that smiled the most at the staff meeting, so I thought she must be most approachable.
I love that. So there's the physical, how it matters, what we display on our faces. So that's how you chose her to be your informal mentor.
Right.
How
Yeah.
did you get from the classroom then to that coordinator for the state?
So after I taught for a few years and I finally got to kind of graduate from second and fifth grade, and I had my own classroom as a third grade teacher. I decided I was ready to keep learning. I love school. I love to learn. I think a lot of teachers do. It's not always come very easily to me, but I love the process. And so I decided I'd throw my name in the hat for a new position during the summer. They had opened up some different positions, and I thought, well, why not? I got an interview for it and I became an instructional coach. That was another weird time because instructional coaching at that time was very, very new. And so I coached K through second grade teachers in reading only and for 5 different schools. Did that for a number of years. By the time I moved into this position, I was coaching just at one school, all curriculum, K-5. So it was just exciting to keep learning and growing. And I think that that's really cool about our profession, that we can do different things.
So it sounds like that seed was planted early on when you were a beginning teacher. That's your moment to help other beginning teachers. So thank you for sharing that. And your state's so lucky to have you because you were beginning teachers so recently, and then you all have your social worker skills too. So Maggie, you are in a very different place, but also influencing universities. So beyond the classroom, share what you're doing now with your math education, but how did you get here and did you always want to be a teacher? And let's just see how that lines up with Erin's journey.
Yeah. So you asked if I always wanted to be a teacher, and I think the answer is definitely yes. I come from a strong line of educators in my family. I'm actually really proud to be a 4th generation teacher. Both parents were educators, grandma on my dad's side, and we have, as family history, some ledgers of my great-grandmother who taught reading and writing and simple arithmetic out of her home. And they bartered in the rural Wisconsin here, and they bartered for eggs and chicken and different things for the lessons. So very proud to be 4th generation teacher. So teaching's been in my blood, it's my passion. I graduated with degrees in English and mathematics. And my first teaching job was high school English, like creative writing, journalism, American literature, contemporary literature. And while I was teaching high school English, I decided to go back and get a master's degree. And, I think Erin had said lifelong learning. That's absolutely where my journey is too. And then I decided to start my doctorate with the intent someday to teach at the university level. I saw myself really called at some point to be there. And while I was working on my doctorate, I was studying social justice education. And the school I was at had a pretty tight curriculum. And so I was looking for a place that would allow me the opportunity to explore and pursue different passions and maybe go outside of curricular boundaries. And I was very fortunate to be hired into a project-based learning middle school. But what I was hired on to do was to work on the mathematics side of the house. So I switched into using that degree more in a project-based learning setting. And I had 10 amazing years working with middle school students. The project-based learning was not just the mathematics. I got to use so much creativity, bringing STEM ideas together, humanities ideas together, art, really wove all of that together. And recently, just this past year, the position opened at the university I wanted to be at in math education. And applied and received that position. And so now I'm working with pre-service teachers, influencing that next generation of teachers in their mathematics education journey.
I love that. It's so interesting, though, the English and the math. There aren't many of us that can hold both sides of the brain in a balance. So you are so unique and gifted and wise. We can benefit from how you look at the world, and that you could work with middle school kids, right? we know, Erin, that's not always easy. So thank you for sharing that pivotal moment. So we heard Erin's pivotal moment really came from within herself as a beginning teacher, thinking, I need to help these people because I'm not getting the help I need. Did you have something like that, or what?
Yeah, I did, Carol. Actually, I told you I moved into this project-based learning school. And I really didn't know much about let's not say I didn't know much. I really didn't know anything about project-based learning.
What is it? Could you tell our listeners? We're all going, there's so many different definitions.
There's so many definitions. My definition centers on students using a driving question, like a big question that they need to answer. And throughout the entirety of the unit, they're investigating this question. They are developing public products towards that question. They're learning rigorous content level. And at the same time, they're engaging in learning success skills or life skills such as cooperation, communication, perseverance, self-management, all in service of answering this question.
So what's an example of a question?
Sure. Here's one. I'll bring it down to Erin. I worked with a second grade classroom. So for my book, I did a lot of research in different classrooms. And a second grade classroom said, how can we attract bees to our community garden? So they wanted to learn because they learned about pollinators and they knew bees were pollinators.
Right.
So there is a bee crisis in terms of our population. And so we studied the science behind the bees. We looked at the different plants. We did some lab experiments. The students designed bee hotels. They're actually called bee hotels, not little bee houses. And we had a carpenter come in and look at their designs and took parts of each of their designs to build a bee hotel, which we installed in their community garden.
So they get to see, so who helps them come up with the questions? And Erin, do you know anything about any of this that we're talking about?
I do. I got to do some PBL training when I was in the classroom, and I love the whole idea and the whole and it really does work in the classroom. It just helps tie everything together and give much more meaning than any worksheet or, it's really exciting work.
Because the students are actively working towards, like, how does it relate to like service learning or project others? stuff? Are all the questions based in outside of the classroom engagement, or?
I think, Carol, it can go so many different ways. You could have a very service-oriented project. Building the bee hotel for the community garden was very service-oriented. Sometimes, though, the project is possibly creating, it could be like social media flyers or a website students are putting together. I had some students investigating how best to design an accessible park or playground. And so they were working as architects and engineers, creating blueprints. And they did present some of their blueprints to the community, but they're not necessarily like actually building and implementing that park.
I love the way you're talking about this. Recently, I was talking with Dennis Shirley and Andy Hargreaves about their new book, Identity. And what is showing up with this identity issue is that students are looking for an identity that's beyond what we're putting on them, be a student, So this project-based system, which I'm actually going to go into my next question for you about, tell me more about your book and a few of the specifics of what steps a teacher could take, relates to this identity that we put on our students or don't put on them, that they can be contributors beyond that label that we're giving them, that they're just taking everything in, that they're creators. Am I expressing it correctly?
Absolutely. I think, we all are seeking our identity. Erin and I both identify as educators. But I know, Erin, you were sharing earlier before we started this about identifying as a mom sometimes, right? And we all have those identities, identifying as a friend, as researchers, as authors, right? We hold so many different identities. And in the classroom, it's exciting for students to take on those identities beyond just being second grader or middle schooler.
Yes.
Right? They're community activists. Right?
I love that. Yes, broader. It's more engagement. It gives us an example of what people can do. So I'm going to go with my next question for you because I think it segues nicely. So you're right. Tell us the title of your book, why you decide. Is this your first book with Corwin?
It is.
Okay, so yay. So let's hear it.
Okay.
Tell me about this topic and why I should be enthusiastic if I'm a listener to this podcast and buy your book and integrate some of this into my own classroom or statewide, Erin.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
All right, go for it.
The book is called Bringing Project-Based Learning to Life in Mathematics. And I think we are already talking about, how is it so engaging? We want it to come to life. We want our classrooms to become vibrant, energetic places where our students do embody these roles and can see themselves as agents of change. So the book has 3 parts. The first part is the why project-based learning. And I highlight everything from, students being agents of change, equity, opportunities to really have a more equitable teaching practice in classroom. And then really just at the heart, a student-centered philosophy, how the stories that students have shared about their identity and agency. I then go into a little bit about the what, and specifically in the mathematics classroom, sometimes math teachers, it takes a little bit more of a leap for them to conceptualize a project. Often when I work with teachers who maybe are more in our humanities side of the house or some of our art side of the house or science, where they're constantly asking these big questions and investigating questions, it seems more natural, but math has always been a little bit more of a puzzle. And when we talk about my journey, when I entered that math PBL classroom, what the classroom at the time was doing was saying, well, here's all of our projects. Oh, and then we have this math curriculum that we work on. And I said,
and that's the deadly math. Sorry.
Right. And they said, well, we just really need to work on these skills. And I said, well, can we work on the skills in a math? They're like, well, sometimes we'll use a little math, but math was never the lead. Math
Yeah.
was never the lens that we used, or at least that at the time my school was using. So it sort of became the challenge of how best I could create projects, experiences, as I often lift them up in my book, so that students could really engage authentically and see mathematics as a powerful tool, and see themselves as mathematicians.
So did you buy the book? So if I was
Sure.
reading the book, I'm listening, I'm a
Yep.
math teacher.
Yep.
I will get sample questions because that's where I would fall down.
Yep.
So I'm kind of getting your mojo now because you've got the English and the math. So
Uh-huh.
you know that you can create the questions that I'm going to need those. And then I don't have to replace my curriculum. I can just integrate one of these per semester or per quarter so that I don't, because I'm busy and I don't have a lot of time to add
Absolutely.
to my curriculum. So tell me how your book could benefit me. Is it going to be worth it to do this?
I fully believe so.
Okay.
Because you have the why part, the what part, and then the last part is the how. And it
Okay,
does take you
good.
through the how. Also, throughout the book, I lift up several projects. So there's a 4K, or what people call pre-kindergarten or transitional kindergarten projects that I worked on,
Okay.
a second grade project, fourth grade project, a couple middle school ones from my own experience, in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 project.
Wow. So you've got it covered.
I tried to give
Okay.
multiple examples, opportunities, and in the additional resources, all of the ideas are written out in
Great.
project format.
For teachers, because you were a teacher.
Yes,
You taught. That's
I
what
am a
I
teacher.
love about this.
I
It's
am. I am a
teacher to
teacher of
teacher. We can do this because
Yeah.
you did it. So
Yeah.
Erin, you had some training in this. What are you learning or taking away from this wisdom that Maggie's sharing with us in her first book? What are you hearing?
Yes. Well, I think, it's hard for people in education. It seems like, well, this new thing came and now this new thing. And what I loved about PBL as a teacher and as a parent watching my girls do some of the projects at school is how invested they became. That question, developing the question is so important because once you've got that question, it just keeps unfolding and you can't even imagine where it's going to go. And you're adding in all of these different standards and life skills as you go along. And it's just exciting. I remember my first grade, when Sophia, my daughter, was in first grade, they did a project-based learning on with a restaurant in town, and they were creating a new pizza. And I can't remember what the question was, but the amount of standards that the teacher was able to fit in there, and just so much excitement about this idea of creating this new type of pizza. And her little group won, and we all went to the restaurant and we got to eat it. It was called the Big Nacho.
Yay! Best part.
But when she thinks back on school, she's going to think about those types of experiences. So it really brings so much learning to life.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And so interesting that you both have this connection to this project base. And I can already see, so here's a lot of novice teachers say they have trouble with classroom management. And here's how we minimize classroom management or behavior issues in the classroom is we engage the kids in something that they really want to do and don't have the answer to. It's like the doctoral dissertation. I remember when I wrote my question, it is about the questions too, Maggie. Writing the question for the doctoral dissertation was the hardest thing that I ever did. And then I remember my advisor, my mentor saying, you better pick a question that you're interested in because you're going to stay with this question for a long time. And I kept getting stuck on writing a question that I already knew the answer to.
Yeah, and there's guides and ideas in there of questions. There's guides how to create the question.
But it's going to help the novices
Yes.
manage, even though it looks like controlled chaos, because kids are going to be talking and interacting and creating new identities for themselves that are beyond their learning identities instead of all these other labels that I'm not even going to mention. So we just know what they are. So thank you for that. Now, Erin, I'm going to switch to you, and I'd like you to just share. Erin is featured in the book, which I love. When I started teaching, I wish I had known. And you wrote a story called Honor Your Teaching Style. And you shared a moment that really touched your heart and that actually changed the way you moved forward in your teaching. So would you share like the nugget of that story with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So yes, honor your teaching style. I was happy to be able to contribute that story to your book. And it was really one comment that I received from the school counselor. She had an office really right next to my classroom. My classroom didn't even have any doors at the time. And so she was pretty much in my classroom, but she had her door open often and I had never thought of it, but she would listen in. And one day she said, I just love listening to you talk to your students. And I thought, oh, well, that's nice. And for me, that really made an impact because I was the youngest teacher at the school I was working at. I didn't know if I was doing things right or wrong or otherwise because I didn't have any teaching partners. I was at that point, the only third grade teacher in my school. And so I wondered quite a bit if I was on the right track or not. And those simple words really helped me to worry a lot less about sounding like other teachers I was seeing or being maybe more stern or, all those things that kind of float around in your head as you're trying to figure out something. And it helped me to just be who I was and know that that was going to be okay, that I was treating the students with respect and I was happy to be there with them, and that's what mattered.
What I love about your story and why I selected it is that we forget that novice teachers need that direct, clear feedback, not the broad generalities, you're doing a good job. That a 5-minute meeting, a 1-minute compliment from someone who just generously gave that to you has influenced your path. And I'm pretty sure the way you're mentoring the beginning teachers in North Dakota is coming through you, that we're recognizing who does nourish us, who compliments us, what are we doing? But the other piece of that is beginning teachers trusting themselves. And the other part is everybody's watching us. You have to be thinking, when we look around the school, we all are seeing everything.
And can I add that too, Carol?
Yes.
I would like to mention and lift up out of that story the fact that the doors were open.
Yes.
I think as new teachers and as veteran teachers and as middle of the road, wherever we are at, opening our doors, welcoming others in, whether they're passing by and just doorway here.
Thank you.
We need to make our thinking and our teaching styles and our, love and passion for teaching and learning visible. And I think open doors are such a critical part.
I love that. Thank you for adding to that. So we're going to wind down from this exciting conversation. I hope all of our listeners are taking away the nuggets here. And so my last two questions are, one is, I really want to know how the two of you have sustained your positivity, your passion. Everybody wants the magic answer. It's not going to be a massage or facial, and you certainly can do that. But self-care is kind of getting like a bad reputation, that it's the way in which we can fix these very complicated issues. But we do have to nourish ourselves and we do have to make decisions. So what do you do to keep yourself balanced, nourished, What's your point of view, Maggie? How do you
Yeah.
take care of yourself?
Well, I'm going to link my tip to also in my book, I call project-based learning experiences.
Okay.
Something that nourishes me is experiences. And so when I turned 30, I made a list of 30 things to do when I'm 30. Actually got the idea from another teacher friend. Teachers are always the most creative, right? So I made these 30 different experiences, and it was a lot to do 30 in a year. So since then, I started making 8 goals, and I do 2 goals per quarter, 4 quarters for the school year. And those 8 things to look forward to, those experiences, those nuggets, sometimes are big like travel, sometimes are small like writing a letter to a childhood friend. But the experience I'm most looking forward to in this upcoming year's list is to do something that I've always wanted to do for my favorite childhood TV show, I Love Lucy. And I want to be in a huge vat of grapes and do some grape stomping.
I love it. I can see you
out.
doing that. We need a picture of that to go with this podcast. Okay.
Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I, I do something. So I'll share what I do sometimes when I need a balance or nourishment or something to do. I do something called dialogue journaling. And I learned this a long time ago, I think from a social worker, Erin. It was like an arts class, and this woman was teaching a group of us how to listen to our inner voices through writing. And that we could write in our journals, but not like a diary. We would write and ask ourselves questions. So if I had this idea that I was going to do 8 things, it's making me very nervous though, because I don't want to say how old I am and that I'd have to do X number of things in a year. I don't think I could fit it in. Anyway, the dialogue journaling is talking to ourselves. So I would just take a piece of paper and I might say, so which 8 things would I like to do? You're probably doing that process, Maggie.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if you're writing it down or how you're doing it.
I am. And I also, this year, I am turning 40. And so I'm adding 40 things.
Oh my gosh. So then 50 and 60? I don't know. Maybe it goes back then. Oh
It'll go.
God.
But the fun part is asking friends and family to join in and add to my list now.
All right. I'm hooked. I might do 5 though. And I'm going to do it in my dialogue journal.
Sure.
So, Erin, what do you do to nourish yourself, keep yourself focused on what's important?
Yeah, so I think, when I was thinking about that, what came to mind for me, I do things. I do, drink water and get good sleep and try to do those types of things. But I also give myself permission to go home. So I have a 15 and a 12-year-old daughters, and I found that just being available and being calm, not being scheduled, and being home is really what they need most. And it helps bring me some peace too, that I'm there, that we're a family, and that I've given myself permission to transition from being a worker to being a mom and putting that hat on. And that means something to me personally as well. So that's been what currently is really sustaining me.
Yeah. And I think it's showing up. So you choose, and these are choices that we're making, experiences, and you get an experience out of that. So as we dialogue what we want to do next, I'm just grateful that you both shared kind of your inner heart of how you keep yourself so engaged in the work that's so important to us. So the final thing, and then I'd like to have Tori summarize for us, but I would like you to give some like advice for all teachers, beginners, very experienced teachers are tired too. So what would the two of you say if you had a sentence of wisdom from this podcast? Erin, what's your wisdom?
Sure. I will say that the dark days don't win. They might come, they might stay too long, but the light keeps creeping in. And that's what, if we keep our focus on where is that light, and doing the best we can and continue to show up, those light days keep coming more and more.
I love that. Thank you. And Maggie, what's your advice?
Mine is
Wisdom, not
right. My wisdom, think is super similar to Erin. It's choose joy. It's 2 words that I had a fabulous person on Etsy make me on a little bracelet. And so whether it's a dark day or just a regular day or a sunshiny day, I try as much as I can to put that little bangle on, look at those words to choose joy, and realize that joy can be a choice. And that my goal is to find it and choose to live and embrace it.
Well, it has been a joy to have this conversation with both of you. And Tori, I'd like you to jump in. So what are the highlights? What did you hear in this conversation that our listeners need to hear?
I actually I'm smiling about the mention of joy and letting the light in, because I actually read a poem this morning that talked about latent joy, and it's been sort of on my mind all day. Like, there's a line, is there joy where I can't imagine it? And I just think it's such an interesting connection that, especially here, we're recording in February, which is a time when, days are getting a little longer. It's still cold, but like the light is coming back. So I think that's a really nice message for this day, but also for what we're talking about here. And I mean, in terms of threads, I think that there's always a little magic in these conversations, as Carol mentioned. You both have such different backgrounds, but kind of found your way to where you are now in education, and really listen to yourselves and listen to your heart. And Erin, I think your message about teaching style, and that I wrote down the mention you said, you don't need to be like all the other teachers. I think that's a really important recognition that you made, but also something that can be really important for teachers at any level of their career, and sort of especially finding a pathway that makes sense for you as an educator. Maggie, I love this conversation around project-based learning, and frankly wish everybody was talking about it and implementing project-based learning. And I think we are seeing more and more schools, and especially teachers, even if it's a teacher in their very own classroom, adopting some project-based learning methods. I think it's really a transformative way to teach and to learn. I love the conversation around students recognizing new identities for themselves, which also kind of ties into that finding your path in your career too, kind of thinking about listening to your own interests, and listening to your own kind of intuition in terms of how you want to be as a learner, and how you want to contribute to your classroom. I think those are really important things for kids to find out about early, so thank you for that. I appreciate that conversation. Those are the big things that I got out of this conversation. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Tori, for your beautiful summary. I'd like to end this podcast session with a quote from Yogi Bhajan. And the quote is, "Travel light, live light, share the light, be the light." And I encourage all of our listeners to be the light to your students and yourselves. Thanks for listening to Teacher to Teacher. Until we meet again.
Thanks, everyone, for joining today's Teacher to Teacher conversation. We hope this time together energized you, inspired you, and reminded you why you chose to become a teacher. You can purchase any of Carol's books and any books mentioned in the podcast online at www.corwin.com. Please leave a review and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you for listening to the Corwin Teacher to Teacher podcast, a place to share teacher wisdom and engage in authentic conversations with experienced educators.
Come explore Corwin's free New Teacher Toolkit and resources. We've curated these resources based on extensive research from teachers, coaches, and principals alike. Whether you are brand new or a veteran teacher, find ready-to-go teaching tools at corwin.com today.